There is one big claim of yours about his bringing him from Mexico, how he was arrested. Can you explain us?
It's not my claim. I'm just sitting in these hearings, so I hear both sides. And yeah. Well, the story is that what I heard from both sides is that he lost his passport. They couldn't find the passport anymore. He was in Mexico. It actually started before that. He was in Peru with his wife. She was going to go to Mexico and visit friends, and he was going to go back to California, where he had a ranch and where he also practiced law. But he had an in-between stop in Mexico City. When he was in Mexico City, he heard that he couldn't enter America anymore, the United States anymore, although he has a visa for it. But they somehow, it wasn't valid anymore. A bit like what they did with Eva Vlaardingenbroek. I don't know if you followed that. She's a Dutch person who suddenly heard that she can't go anymore to England, to the UK.
Yes, I heard that story. And I hope very soon I will have an interview also with her.
Yeah. But a similar thing happened. So his visa was suddenly not valid anymore. So he stayed in Mexico with his wife. And they have a camper van or something like that. And so one day they couldn't find the passports. And so he called up the consul. The nearest consul next to them was the one in Tijuana. And he said, what do we do? Can we order new ones, emergency ones until we find them or whatever? So new ones were ordered. But only a couple of days later, they found the passports again, which is also a bit of a strange story, but they found them again. So he called the consul, with whom he actually had a good relationship. And they had talked about Corona and they got along well. So he said, I found my passports. What do I do? Can we just cancel the other ones and I can use this? And then the consul said, okay. But he called back and he said, actually, no, because it might be that your normal passports will be canceled at the border if you go travel. And Reiner already thought that was a bit odd, but okay. And they had to agree to come to Tijuana airport. The consulate was being renovated. And so the consul said he would come to the airport, meet them there, give them the passport, sign all the documents, and it would be gone. And they were going to go back on the next flight back to where they stayed. But when they arrived in Tijuana, they were awaited not by the consul, who wasn't there at all, but by 6 immigration officers, who then took Reiner Fuellmich. His wife went off the plane first because they apparently didn't have the same seats, or she went off first and she saw the officers and she already thought, what is happening? And then when they saw Reiner, they had a picture of him and they had to check whether it was him. And then they took him and they said, you have to come to Mexico City. So he and his wife were, divorced, separated there. His wife had to go to a police cell in Tijuana for one night and one whole day. He was flown to Mexico City, and there he was put in front of, officials and had to sign Spanish documents or, in Spanish language to say that he was going to be deported. But officially, you need an interpreter there. Somebody needs to explain to you what these documents say. And deportation can only happen if you've done a crime, if you've entered the country on illegal documents or you forged documents or, whatever. But he's, of course, done none of it. So he was then put on a plane to New Mexico. There was a plane from Lufthansa waiting, and he was put on board. And with him came 2 Mexican officials, the immigration officers. And he asked those officers, who's paying for all this? Because they came all the way over, they stayed in hotels and whatever. And they said the German government is paying for this. Well, if the German government is paying for it, then it can't be a deportation. Then it's paid for by the Mexican government. And the German government could get Reiner to come to Germany, but only through an extradition process. Now, we know from the case of Julian Assange how long such a process may take, because you first have to go to court in the country where you're staying. So that would be Mexico. Then the judge in Mexico would have to look at your case and see if there's anything there. And they would have likely concluded there was nothing to see there, just like the chief prosecutor had decided there was nothing to see there. And they couldn't risk it, is my interpretation. So they flew him illegally to Frankfurt, arrested him at Frankfurt airport, and then took him to the prison because he was so-called in danger of fleeing the country.